Welcome back to the War Room. Shooter and Svihlik here with Draft HQ, Prep Baseball. I can't even get the words out of my mouth because I'm so excited to talk about this awesome topic and series that we're doing here, DJ, with regards to sleepers, especially watching the postseason right now in October with so many guys who under the radar, gut feel types. Oh, I really like this guy, but I didn't want to take him in the first round. I like this guy. Tarek Skubal continues to do immeasurable things. Cy Young, awesome stuff. But it's not just him. The entire playoffs filled with guys who were not just first-round picks. They were all over the place, gut feel, day two. So it's been awesome to watch October.
Yeah, especially that Detroit. You just brought up some of the Detroit players. I mean, you got guys like Matt Vreeling. You got Kerry Carpenter and so on and so forth. Guys that just they're impacting championship level teams. And you see that up and down the playoffs. Cleveland, of course, has been really good at that for years, taking guys deep day two into the draft and so on and so forth. So that's exciting. They don't all have to be Aaron Judge and Giancarlo and all that.
It is fascinating for me. What I love when I see a guy, I'm like, where's this guy from? It's like the first thing I do, sitting on the couch. Where's this guy from? Where was he? What was his high school? Where did he go to college? How did this process happen? I love doing that. I don't know about you.
Oh, no doubt. I sat there last night watching that. And my first thought, and not just as a scouting director, but as a national cross-checker, so because some of these players were drafted in 17 and 18, we're 6 years removed from their draft time. And my immediate thought is, how did we miss? What did we have on them? Where were we on this guy? I know we're going to talk a little bit about some West Coast players and sleepers. My first thought as the year went on, and I know this team's not in the playoffs. What the heck did we have on Brian Wu from Cal Poly? How does that player in 2021 go all the way to the 6th round? And I know it's a college player, but point is sometimes really good players, you miss on them.
So. Yeah, and I think a lot of what you and I have discussed offline here is about the processes of this. And I think the bigger thing for me, right, like was, I love that guy in high school. I love that guy. All those, hey, like, yeah, this is not going to be a blind squirrel situation where like, oh yeah, revisionist history is saying, oh yeah, I love that guy. Well, you didn't put your money where your mouth was. But from the scouting side, what is your process in getting it from, yes, we had this, and we're going to talk about today and in the future, like how those processes develop over time and why guys may not come off the board?
Yeah, that's a good observation there, Shooter. Looking at just some of the notes that we had here, you're going to miss on these players, specifically when we're talking about high school players. And I don't think it's a failure by the organizations. The reality is a lot of boxes have to be checked once you get into those top 2 or 3 rounds. And with the way college baseball is working now, if a player can't make it into the top 40 or 50 on your board, which is a really tight group of players, because the high school players are also competing against college players. So if they can't make it onto that board, I think it's a very fair statement to say what you just said. Man, we really like this guy. We just couldn't make the money work. And you spread that out over 30 teams. And that's why college becomes a very fruitful place to shop, because good players, just looking back at this last year's draft, how many players in the first round weren't even talked about 3 years ago when they were in college? So we said this before. What are the boxes you have to check? When you're looking at young high school players or college players, but specifically in this case, high school players, you've got the physical talents of the player. And some of it can be measured. You got the raw powers, you got the arm strengths, you got the running speeds, those types of things. You've got the athleticism of the player. What type of athlete is the player? What types of skill sets does the player have, which oftentimes can be verified through performance? What are the analytics? What are the makeup of the player? And what we find a lot of times when you start getting into the high school group, that you really, to use your words, and I think they're good, you really like the player, but there are missing pieces. When you start making major investments in players in the top couple rounds, there's usually not a missing piece. And if there is a missing piece, it's overcome by some extremely good other things. Okay. Once you get into the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, they're good players, but they've got a lot of missing pieces. And what you find are, a lot of times it's some combination of a physical tool and a performance, or it's a physical tool and a skill. Certainly there could be an injury, but that's a different conversation. So let's use an example. If you get into a player like this is going back a ways. A non-profile player like a Brett Phillips that played for a long time in the big leagues, drafted in the 5th or 6th round by the Astros. He wasn't a toolsy player. And the industry in general may not have said that his skill set was that high. So the Astros come in, they select the player, and he becomes a good role player in the big leagues. But there are those missing pieces that often they're just missing. And teams can't fill in those gaps. So they do like the player, but they can't give them the money that's required.
No, and that's a big key to it, right? The signability, but more so like we're developing tier 1 at this level.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is at a $3 million valuation. Where are we going to place this player? These sleepers we're going to talk about, they have some warts, or I don't even want to say warts, but there's something that's not giving you a slam dunk to make you feel warm and fuzzy about them, especially over the college guy, where the value might be from that aspect.
Let me jump in here. That's really important what you just said. Compared to the college guy, why do we like college players? They give us that comfort of performance.
Mm-hmm.
And if the high school guy doesn't have that performance, it just becomes very, very difficult to put them up in that area because it's unknown. You don't know what's going to happen when the player goes out and you put them into pro ball. And we all want players to perform well. Pitching, one of the things we said last time, pitching is not necessarily this linear development. It goes up, it goes down, it goes sideways. It can come from all different directions. The offensive players, when you talk about sleepers, what you really want are players that are going to show up and be good right now. You want them to show up and be good right now so that they're not playing catch up. And one of the reasons outside of their physical talents, tools, that we think they're going to be good is because we've seen them be good.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very simple. It's very logical. So that's what becomes difficult. And to fill in that blank, one of the questions that was asked was, when does a player that's a sleeper not become a sleeper? It's amazing that sometimes these high school players, and we can go through a laundry list of players from Alex Bregman to Dansby Swanson. I'm going to leave the pitchers out for a second. Charlie Condon, Travis Bazzana, Nick Kurtz. What's amazing is that the industry lacks the confidence to give them the money, lacks the confidence to give them the money in July of their high school draft year. They don't get drafted, or they decide not to sign. They become a late insurance pick. Then they show up on a college campus, and for some reason the narrative just changes, and we look at him and we go, oh, now he's a guy. That's crazy. It's wild how that happens, but that's a psyche part of scouting.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, and just for those listening, kind of the way we're going to break this down, and you did a great job, DJ, kind of separating it, because there are different levels of sleepers, right? Those day one sleepers who, we're not hearing about it. They catch some helium. Then all of a sudden, Nick York is taken in the first round. All of a sudden, right, Anthony Volpe goes in the first round. You had a nice Jackson Merrill, Braylon Payne, even Jackson Holiday, which you've talked about in the past, like not the first round, but first overall pick. There's some sleeperness to that. The second version of guys who we think can be college guys who blow up, right? They go off to school. Mm-hmm. You're betting on them. Every area guy's like, this guy's going to go to school and blow up. We can't give him the $3 million now, right? I always think about prep righties. 23, you take Noble.
That's right.
Steven Echeverria from New Jersey. Those are the only two guys who got $3 million and above, prep right-handers. Now, there's going to be a lot of guys that are seven-figure bonuses out of college from that class, but in that small spec in scope, those were the two that were $3 million and above in 23. And then the third one is just kind of going to be the gut feel guys. So the way I kind of look at it, and you tell me if this is the same way for you, gut feel pick, I always go to positionless corner profile, right guy. Who is the guy who can hit from the position player side? Or, hey, this is a huge metric pick on the pitching side, who I think that if this all comes together, there could be a lot coming. Right now, Stanford's got a big-time arm. What's the kid's name? Jeez, he's going to blow up this year. He's great with Team USA. I can't even think of his name, but he was kind of that gut feel from NorCal coming out a couple of years ago, who's now tickling 100, and he's doing a lot of good stuff there. But that's what I think of in that third sense.
You brought up a good point there. If you were to ask a scout, hey, who are your sleepers going to be? And I think we should just expand on this just for 2 seconds. Who are your sleepers going to be? My question be, what buckets are you going to look in? You just nailed one of them. Let's look in the generic, I don't really have a position. I'm not going to play in the middle of the field. I'm going to have to play on the corner. Maybe I didn't do everything I could over the course of the year as a bat guy. Let's make sure we're conscious that we're looking for that player. Let's make sure that we're conscious looking for the catcher that nobody wants to take out of high school, and say, okay, if we were to take catchers and catchers were signable in the 5th round, in the 4th round, which one would you love to have? Because we know that Shea Langeliers is going to show up in college at Baylor, and he was the 4th round pick that nobody wanted to sign, and then he's Shea Langeliers, and now he's a big league catcher for Oakland, previously Oakland. So, to your point on pitchers, I think that's another good one. Maybe it's the toolsy guy that literally you don't think he can play. He's just tooled out of his mind, or I won't say tooled out of his mind with multiple tools. Maybe he's got one really good tool, and then he shows up for a team and he's actually more skilled than you think he is. That happens a lot of times too. So the bat guy, the catcher guy, that pitcher that you're talking about, all really good choices when you're trying to source these kind of players. What did Alex Bregman look like? We've all seen videos of him taking ground balls at shortstop when he was in high school. All that was said when he was in a draft room was, man, this guy can really hit. This guy can really hit. I think he can hit, not power.
What about those toolsy guys? Because I talked to a lot of minor leaguers, and there will be those toolsies picks, and they show up, and guys are like, this kid stinks. Like, he gets to a team, that guy has no skill. He has no chance to ever play. Yeah. How long is that developmental curve? This is kind of taking us off course a little bit, but like that developmental curve, like, do you have 2 years for that guy? How nervous are you that, like, oh, this guy can really run. He's got but he can't steal first base, and we've been struggling for the last 1,000 at bats. You know
what I think of when you say that? What I find myself thinking about with sleepers is you better be willing to fail and fail hard. That's what a sleeper really is. Let's use an example of somebody who's not a sleeper. Brady Ebel, Eli Willits. And there's no sleeper to any of those guys. Kason Cunningham, everybody knows how much we like him. If Kason Cunningham fell on his face and didn't do anything in pro ball, you'd fall out of your chair. You'd be like, come on, that's not possible. Why? Because he's so good. You could say this about a handful of players. They're so good that there is a floor. And that's why you take them. You've got ceiling, you've got floor, you give them a bunch of money because you can say, well, worst case, we get this. But if you pull a player off the board who's your gut field skill hitter guy and he doesn't hit, you get nothing. Zero. You lose. You go home, and you have to be comfortable with that. That's almost inherently what a sleeper is you got to be, and I've taken a few of those guys historically as an area scout and whatnot. You just got to be comfortable failing.
Let me ask you for the area scouts, and I think a huge part with the sleepers is the accountability, or even more so to go back, look, check your work. What did I evaluate right versus, hey, I was kind of off on this kid. Where did I miss? Because for the future, I know it's something I try to practice a lot. I really like this kid. Now I'll follow along. Didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? What did I miss? Was it the makeup? Was it the injury history? Was it something with that, or hitting on a guy? Is that something you'd ask your area guys to do? I know you're handing reports, you're putting reports in the system, but I think there's even more so internally for yourself. What was your feel on this? This was a yes. I needed to get this guy at 1.5. I needed to get him, whatever it may be. How did you evaluate area guys from that aspect?
Well, to digress for a second, the gut feel thing that I've referenced, that you've referenced, what we got to remember here, it just doesn't come from anywhere. This just doesn't just appear. The gut feeling part of this comes from a very conscious, concerted effort to go through all of the boxes, to do immense amount of research on the player. And therefore, I have a gut feel that this could be the guy. So let's use an example. Let's go back to Alex Bregman for a second and evaluating an area scout. If you come to the table with Alex Bregman in high school and you say, this guy can really, really hit. All I'm going to say is, okay, tell me why you think he's going to hit. Because he's not here for his raw power. He's not here because he's a burner. He's not here because he's got the best shortstop defensive actions we've ever seen. Why is he here? Why are you saying this? So hopefully the scout can get into like swing types and some comparables. He can talk about where he's seen them across the entire spectrum of scouting and so on and so forth. And then you pull Alex Bregman and you can sign him in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. Then he has to show up and do it. He has to show up and hit. What I would say is he doesn't have to show up and necessarily become the Alex Bregman that we all know now. Because that's another part of this when you get into the 3rd or the 4th or 5th round. Let's keep the expectations in check here. We're not thinking we're going to get some superstar or some all-star. All we're saying is, shooter, you come to me with Alex Bregman, you say, hey, this guy can really hit. He shows up and he hits. If he becomes a 4th, an extra infielder, or if it's an outfielder that becomes an extra outfielder, that's fine. You just want to make sure when you say he's going to hit. That's it. I want to, as an area scout, I'm very proud of a selection that I made that never panned out to be much more than an up-down filler in the big leagues. Corbin Joseph. He was a 4th round pick out of Franklin High School in Tennessee. I thought he can really, really, really hit. And you know what? You go back and look at that young man's track record through the minor leagues. He was in the big leagues in just a few years. Why? Because he could really, really, really hit. Now, what held him out of the big leagues for long periods, a little bit of power issue, some defensive issues. That's a separate conversation. Those scouts need to keep track on their own, and the scouting directors and the organizations are keeping track on them so that when we're in a draft room, we know exactly who we can look to when we're looking for a certain skill type or tool type, and we can trust the scout.
It always feels to me like the data will assess the ceiling. The scout will assess the likelihood that he will approach that ceiling. Is that something?
Yeah, I could see that.
Will you?
Good way to look at it. Here.
Is that a way to evaluate your area guy, your cross, whoever's under you, right? Especially you as a scouting director, you need to be able to trust all these guys. When it comes down to it, hey, we have all the TrackMan data, we have all the blast motion data. We can see what his statistics are. We have most teams a full analytics department. This is easy. You're out there to evaluate. Do we think this kid can be a big leaguer? Do we think what do we think his work can be?
You have to fill in all the gaps for the decision makers, and that comes from the amount of work you do on the player. And there is a scorecard here. I know as a scout, you brought this up a second ago. As a scout, I'm going to keep a scorecard on myself, and the organizations aren't necessarily keeping a scorecard on the scouts as a witch hunt. They're just doing it so that they know who to trust in certain situations, because the entire draft gets really uncomfortable really, really quick as you move into day 2. And all the organizations are looking for is comfort. And truth be told, in today's day and age, that comfort comes from models and those types of things, because they're not 100% sure they can. But I've been around a lot of really good scouts that you get into day 2 and they know exactly who to pick.
And you know where the
players, they've got a library of players.
The shifting over here, a lot of comfort, warm and fuzziness on sleepers and any prospect in general, as I've seen where players are from throughout the playoffs. All these guys, where are they from? California. There's a lot of players that are coming out of California, and I think that's why going through this sleeper, starting west to east, California just kind of hugs its own orbit, I guess I'll say. And I'm looking through our California rankings, our national stuff, our draft board, all of that stuff. And the amount of players that you can just focus in on California, guys are going to get better, right? They're going to be really good. And we have tons at the top. There's going to be first round talent this year. There'll be first round talent in 3 years. And then there'll be guys who just go off as 5th round picks, 12th round picks, 19th round picks, and they continue to get better. There's something in the water out there. I always look back. I think it's the expectation of it. I think there's just so many big leaguers that it is an option for those players to expect that. That's something in California, which is why we are starting with this state. What do you got on the Great Golden State?
What I have is, I'm probably not going to make a lot of friends here when I say this, but you know what? I'm going to say it anyways. And it really isn't an indictment. I'm not going to say this is an indictment or a heavy criticism of the scouts that work in California. They're dealt a really difficult hand. They know the players are supposed to be good, and they see the players a lot. So there does tend to be this scout fatigue, this prospect fatigue that sets in. And what I would just generally say, and this is where I probably wouldn't make a lot of friends, but I don't mean this as an indictment. they tend to be late to the players. You say, wait a second, how are they late to the players? They see them all the time. What they're late to is how good that player really is. They see them so much, they see all the holes. And I think that's a human nature thing. If the scouts in Kansas were seeing their players that much and they didn't have to drive 8 hours to see one player all the time, that would probably happen there. But that's very, very, not just not organizationally, but just as a general broad brush, scouts in California tend to be a little bit late to their players. So you got to be conscious of that if you're an organization. So that's my thought on the Golden State.
I love that. Let's shift into some more specifics with players. So like some day one sleepers, and this was a name that you brought up that you had down some good notes. Once we get going, I'm going to dive into kind of the historical aspect in it. But a San Diego kid, right-handed pitcher Grayson Bowles was a name that you really liked. Tell me about what you saw and what you liked about it.
Yeah, the industry doesn't seem to. I know he's going to a big school, which is usually very important here. Okay, like let's put that out there. That should be something else we talked about with sleepers. They tend to be going to big schools. So if you're a scout out there, know where the players in your area, know which guys are going to Texas, going to A&M, going to UCLA, so on and so forth. Bowles specifically, I didn't have much on him, and he is not celebrated really high in the industry. I know we have him somewhere in the 60s, I think, on our board maybe, and that's much higher than most people have him. We actually really like Grayson Bowles. He was really interesting. Here's a guy that was up to let's start with his body type. He's big, he's strong and durable. Looks like a major league starter at 6'4", 6'5". Everything works. He throws strikes. It's 91 to 94, and he's got a feel for a slider. And he throws both of them for strikes. You look back at his area code performance, he pitched right after Seth Hernandez, I believe, and he pitched extremely well. It was just a very quiet, went through 3 innings, walks off the mound. You look up 4 or 5 weeks later as you're compiling all your notes, and you go, wow, this Grayson Bowles guy is actually really, really good. So I thought that was a really good pick. 91, 94, has a feel for a slider, needs to come up with a changeup. Looks like some of his spin rates and stuff were all in line with what you're looking to see, and a guy that just screams back of the rotation starter.
So to your point, the way I look at it, and I love Grayson Bowles. He was a future game standout. The frame metrics, he's a two-way guy, can swing it a bit too, really personable. So the off the field stuff I think will be helpful. When I look at it, right, from a national perspective, what separates this guy and Justice DeYoung? Just how far apart are those similar frames, similar stuff? Bowles has a slider, breaking curveball, close to 3,000 RPM. The velo's there. What's interesting about Bowles is, and I think this probably gets him in the locality and the fact when guys do see him a ton, I have seen him get hit. And there's been a lot of times where it's like, why is this getting hit? There's something here, something with the fastball profile. And the reason why he's so high on our board, this feels like something the kid has the aptitude, the athleticism, where an adjustment could make him explode in a second. And I'm sure there are some analytics departments that are very mad at me for saying this right now. And the fact that I think he could really blow up over the next year, but especially the next 3 and 4 years. This is a kid who split his time. He has the frame. He's got the pitch package right now to work with, the ability to manipulate shapes. If there's just and the hottest thing in pitching right now, with all the analytics and everything that everybody's doing right now, the one thing I always hear these pitching coaches talk to is just changing the side on the rubber, which everything's cyclical, right? That all these analytics, and they're like, yeah, he should be pitching on the first base side. He should be pitching on the third base side. I'm like, you could have gone back to 1960 and done the same exact thing. But to your point, DJ, you saw it, and this background stuff, I think he's got a huge chance to make a huge jump, whether it's going to be at Texas, whether it's going to be this spring in San Diego. His team will get plenty of looks. They're a really talented club there at St. Augustine. So awesome choice there on the top on Grayson Bowles.
Yeah, and it was tough because I liked Ricken as well. He's pretty good. Von Necker threw the ball extremely well against the Yankees at area codes. It was just Bowles just really stood out as a guy that maybe you look up in 3 years and you go, man, or I'll tell you what, maybe you look up in 20 months and you show up at Texas and you're getting calls from the Texas scouts and you're going, hey, why is this guy at Texas? This guy should have signed, and that's, I can envision that happening to piggyback off of what you were talking about.
I would love to have him as a coach. But you talk about Necker to me epitomizes this kid in any other state, any other state, any cold weather state. This guy is every area scout is going to every single outing, but he's in Southern California. And every now and then there's a ho-hum 95, 96 from this kid who's 6'4" and throws strikes and has a high red fastball and is able to kind of spin it. But if he's tickling 99, 100 in the spring, I wouldn't doubt it. And it's attributed to just how talented the state is, and especially Southern California with all those guys down there right now, that Von Necker can be, this is a good player. Yeah, he's top 100 prospect. Like there's so many of those guys. I do want to throw a couple out with the day one sleepers, and it's ties more closely to what you and I have been talking about here and when area guys have to go in. But Gavin Feen, who ironically another Texas commit, and Josiah Hartshorn, who is a Texas A&M recruit. Both guys can hit.
We talked about Feen. I like Feen a lot. Both
guys can hit. Positional profile. Oh, we're interested in, although Feen did a great job in the outfield, first base. His versatility, I think, will I wouldn't be surprised if he could catch too. His brother's a catcher. But the positional diversity of it, how do you go about evaluating those guys? Now, especially Hartshorn, who can really hit the ball, big time exit velocities. He's at J. Sarah, he's at Orange Lutheran. Sorry, Trinity League. He'll get plenty of looks. How helpful is it for those two that they're in Southern California to make scouts feel warm and fuzzy?
Well, I think that's going to be really helpful. And of course, Feen specifically. Feen, am I pronouncing his name right? Feen. I should know that. I really like the player. And we talked about him in previous episodes. That he is the quintessential, specifically him. He's the quintessential guy that everybody knows him. Everybody likes him, but he falls into category 1. They know him, they like him, and then all of a sudden there's a sleeper team out there we took him at 32 because we just think he can hit. I mean, how much did we like Dickerson, who the Nationals took?
Yep.
If Dickerson's going to go up there, why can't Feen, who all he's ever done is hit, go up there? You just have to answer your question, you just got to buy into the bat. You get to know the player, you watch him in the offseason, and you say, you know what, bats play, I'm taking this player. And that's it.
Moving on a little bit more to the college types, and I'm gonna get on my soapbox for you here because you talked about where they're committed to matters, right? You find those big schools. I will say this: in the state of California, you better respect the Big West, because guess what we're finding out? Those Big West guys get a lot better. Santa Barbara's rolling out first rounders. Irvine's rolling out first rounders. Long Beach, Fullerton, Northside, UCSD now. The amount of prospects that are going to those schools, and I think, in future shows we'll talk about the new landscape of the NCAA recruiting. But those guys, you need playing time, and those guys get playing time. They get better.
They get better.
That's where I look to in California. When you're looking for a sleeper, hey, this guy Josh Janicelli is 6'5". Still developing some strength in NorCal. He's a right-hander. Where's he committed to? Oh, UCSB. This guy's got a chance to get onto campus, be a Sunday starter, weekday starter as a freshman. He's going to put on 60 innings. He goes off into the summer, and then all of a sudden, 20 months from now, to your point, we're looking at this guy as a first rounder. Who's the number one right-hander in the class right now in college? Bremner.
Yeah, exactly.
UCSB.
Don't take for granted that scouts do this either. The ability to sit down and just ask that question is critically important. Yeah. I don't think it requires any intelligence. It just requires a care level. It requires a perceptiveness. The worst thing that I can't remember this ever happening to me, but I couldn't even imagine how I would feel if I had a guy either really far down my list or I didn't turn him in at all, and he ends up at UC Santa Barbara, and a year and a half later, he's Bremner. You can't feel, if you have pride in what you do, you can't feel good about that because, to your point, it's out there for you. You know what the history is. So just pay attention to the history. If you're an area scout in Southern California and the player's going, or in this case, you just brought up Josh
Mhm.
from Northern
Genesee.
California, you should just probably know. Your job isn't as a scout just to know the players that are going to play in the big leagues. You got to know, like right now, you've got to know the best players in your area that have some pathway, whether it's straight through into professional baseball or it's a pit stop at UC Santa Barbara. That is your job to know that.
And
So
I
you
love,
should know it.
and I'll be a little bit louder about it too with when teams make those selections, right? If Josh Janisselli comes off the board in the third round, let's say this year, oh, there's some surprise. Like this scouting department said this. We are taking this guy at this price because we think there's a Bremner there, right? And
Yeah.
I think they should be applauded for that, I guess I would say. And
Yeah,
in the
sure.
moment, that's a great pick. Whether it
Yeah.
happens, like we talked about, everything's not linear with the development aspect. So, but the idea, the process was great to get there. I do want to talk about a few other guys. Jordan Marion's another UCSB guy, switch hitter. I just think it's going to really hit. He's a Jay Serra guy. Ethan Port, we're talking about bigger schools. Ethan Porter, I think, could have a huge spring. I'd expect him to kind of blow up. Oregon State
Mhm.
recruit. And then we're talking about the big schools too. Here are a couple for you, and I'll tell you more about them. Cooper Fleming is a Vanderbilt recruit. 6'3", kind of a wiry athlete. I feel like he's kind of played, I don't want to say second fiddle. I don't have the right words. It's not the way to put it, but played summer ball with Billy Carlson. So kind of in the shadows a little bit. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if a lot of area guys like, we really like this Fleming kid, but he's still wiry athletic. Is he going to get stronger? That's what guys are going to be scouting throughout the spring. He similarly, but in a different context, Tyler Wick, versatile infielder, kind of similar Fiend, not that quite the same power profile, but he's at St. Augustine down in San Diego or in Southern
Mhm.
California as well. He will get plenty of looks. Everybody's going to get out to see the Bulls starts.
So where's Wick going? Do we
Wick's
know?
going to Oregon.
So he's going to Oregon. Okay.
Has always hit for me. I like the actions. He's a right profile. Will he stick at shortstop? Oh, we're not sure. But because those scouts have been on it, I think he'll get enough looks where is somebody going to pull the trigger? And that's what you and I will be able to discuss because we know him. We're putting our notes out in the open, unlike all the teams that are kind of hiding. Hey, we really like this Wick kid. So that's one of the guys for
Let
me.
me ask you a question
too.
I'm going to ask you a question because you
Okay.
just gave two players and it made me think of something. Is it enough to get on a draft board to have one tool and be going to one of these schools? Let's not talk about if you like the player or you don't like the player. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about just getting the players onto the draft board somewhere. Is it enough that they're going to Vandy, that they're going to Oregon, that they're going to UCLA, and they're going there because they're good players, of course?
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough to get them on your draft board? It's a rhetorical question, but when I posed that to my staff, I was amazed how much pushback I got on that. They felt like it was a waste of time. And yeah, it's not a waste of time, even though you might not sign that player out of high school. But you know what doesn't look really good? When Cooper Fleming shows up at Vanderbilt and in 2 years he's going off the board on day one. That looks really bad because your job when you're scouting, where'd you say Flem was from?
He's a Southern California kid.
So he's a Southern Cal. That doesn't look really good on the Southern California scouts. And you can't hide behind, well, we couldn't sign him anyways, because that is not your job. Your job is to identify players that have the potential, whether it's the 20th round, 30th. I'm showing my age here. 20th round or the first round, there's a place for the player. There's a place to start that paper trail and that track record. It doesn't feel really good when you open up your system and you're looking for Andrew Vaughn in high school and he's not in your system, or Spencer Torkelson, or so on and so forth. You get the point. So
it's the amount of these guys in California. I just can't get over it. Just cruising through the list here. I'm sorry, I'm looking away from the screen right now because most states, and you have 10 guys where you're looking for, hey, this sleeper. In California, you're talking like 150, 200 guys where you're piecing through and you're looking at guys like Paul Grossman, Aiden Aguayo can really hit, Dylan Harrison, Walter Urban. Those are all guys where, hey, I'm going to get a look in there. And there may not be 50 guys here and cross checkers and national guys, but I'm going to go in there. And if I put in that work and see it, maybe I'll get a chance. Cash Brennan, who's another kind of similar to
Mhm.
Fleming, a NorCal kid committed to Arizona, who is wiry, athletic. I'll say left-handed hitter. Does he stick it short? Those are some things to be looking at. But the ones I do want to mention too, who are kind of further down, and John Kastner's right-hander from Clovis High School, committed to UNC, right-hander. I'll be following that closely throughout the spring. And that kid Cole Clark, who's an Irvine commit. And again, it goes back to, hey, the Big West is producing dudes, right? Like these first rounders are not just coming from UCLA, Stanford, and USC. Hey,
Right.
they're coming from the Big West. We better step up and recognize that these guys recruit too. They have jobs. They do well. So
Oh,
those are
Brian
kind of the
Woods from
guys.
Cal Poly.
Oh, Cal Poly.
Drew Thorpe was
Oh my
from
gosh.
Cal Poly.
Brooks Lee. It just goes on and
Mhm.
on. As I'm looking for, and not to mention Cole Clark's at Huntington Beach, right? It's a nice swing. You see
Right.
Irvine kid. There's a chance he's going to step right into campus, have a chance to play. That's awesome. So California in general, just the amount. CJ Hughes is another LA kid, UC Santa Barbara commit, switch hitting shortstop. Shoot, they were just growing trees in California. You could go anywhere you look. If you drop this kid into the Midwest, into the Northeast, New England, Northwest, Pacific Northwest, you're talking about, hey, these guys are getting tons of looks. And I see it all the time when I go around nationally to especially cold weather states, or I shouldn't say that, especially Southern California, right? Eh, they just shrug off guys where, hey, if this guy was from like Idaho or something, the
Right.
industry would be going insane.
Who's Joey? Is it Joey Estes? Is that his first name? Pitching in the big leagues now. He was a low pick, high school
Oh
pick.
yeah, yes,
For the Braves, I want to say took him in the 13th, 14th, 15th round. Out there, they signed him. It starts with wanting to like the player.
yeah.
If you like the player, you'll do the work. You'll figure out the signability, and you'd be surprised what you find sometimes. The players are a little more signable than you think.
Well, DJ, this has been awesome. Our future shows will be much shorter as we set things up with regards to what the sleepers are. But we'll be making our way west to east, some Pacific Northwest, some Four Corners action coming soon. Texas, obviously you guys all know what the map looks like. You can kind of Magellan it from west to east here. But DJ, this has been awesome. California, get ready. Really good class out there, but not just those top guys. There's some serious depth. There's lots of sleepers. We can't wait to see it. Until next time, this has been the War Room powered by Draft HQ and Prep Baseball. Shooter and Svihlik. We'll see you next time.